This is John from Hand of Kalliach, and you're listening to the Dan Chan Show.
So I'm joined by John and Sophie, husband and wife duo from Scottish Celtic folk melodic death metal outfit Hand of Kalliach. Did I say that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Spawn.
Very
Banging.
good.
Now, you're the first husband and wife team that I've ever had on the show, and the first Scottish band I've had on since I think I spoke to Party Cannon like a long time
nice.
ago. You know, those guys. How are you doing, guys? And you're in the most amazing city in Europe, Edinburgh. How's things?
Oh, awesome. Thanks very much. Yeah, we're all good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks very much for having us on.
Sun is amazingly shining in Scotland, which is very unusual.
Have you had much? Do you get much snow? I mean, I've been up to. I think the furthest north I've been is Elgin. I've been through Aviemore, and it was snowing when I was there. It was very like January. But do you get much snow in Edinburgh? Or is it just wet?
You can do, but yeah, most of the time, as you say, it's pretty wet, pretty
I feel
windy
like
as well.
Aviemore's always snowing.
Yeah,
It's always,
it's not
yeah.
that way. Yeah, always.
Well,
do
they-
that.
Bears there, isn't it?
Yeah.
They hope so. Anyway, now let's get on to the music. You've just released your brand new album. Now, I mean, I'm going to fuck this up, right? Corryvreckan?
Corryvreckan, that's it. Yeah,
Yes.
really good. Yeah,
Twice
thanks,
now.
spot on so far.
2-0.
Yeah,
And only last week, guys. How's it been received? And I've read some incredible words that are going
Yeah.
about. How does it feel? How does it feel to get it out? How does it feel, the reviews? Do you go looking for reviews? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it's been absolutely phenomenal. I don't think we expected to get nearly this level of reception, and some of the features we've had. I mean, you know, we've been metalheads since we were kids to one degree or another, and seeing us getting good reviews up in the likes of Metal Hammer, Revolver, Decibel, you know, on their sort of best new tracks this week, and then it's like your face up
It
next
feels
to
weird.
like Rob
It feels
Halford's
very weird.
like on the
Yeah, I
it's
saw
pretty
that.
wild.
I saw that. It's
Absolutely
like,
crazy.
John, not important. Let's keep Sophie
Yeah, I know.
there.
I fell
Stick
off.
with
Yeah,
her.
it's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. Yeah. They'll save me for the main paper issue. I'm
Of
sure.
course.
Yeah.
Big deal. So
Yeah,
are you the
it's
guy,
pretty wild.
do you, I mean, I can imagine, I know what it's like with my wife in bed. We end up just on our phones before we go to sleep, scrolling through shit. Do you ever like just, oh, look, new one in, you know, just Googled our names again? Or do you kind of avoid that and wait for them to come to you?
I think one of the advantages that we get with a lot of the social media options that we've got these days is that people just tag us all the time because it really improves their own visibility and their own sort of traction. So a lot of the time it just comes to us and we don't have to do any sort of Googling ourselves. I think sometimes every now and again we'll get a roundup. This is the joys of being on like a decent label like Prosthetic, is that they'll send us like a roundup of anything we might have missed so we can go and make sure we're, you know, engaging and reviewing and seeing what's going on. So it's but it's been nuts, hasn't it? It's
I
been,
think you're better at reading the
you're better at the nice interactions than I'm better at the reading things.
So let's get the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, obviously, I'm going to go heavy on the husband and wife thing, which you probably expect. You're the first husband and wife I've spoken to in the industry on my show, so we're going to go heavy on that. How do you write together? How does that happen? I mean, usually bands get together in the studio once a week, twice a week, hit the pub, then they get together. What's it like, literally 24/7, writing, trying to be creative together? How did you create this album?
Yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, and it helped because we started in lockdown, so it was quite an unusual kind of start, I guess. So we were just doing it to keep sane at first, just kind of mucking around and
Really? So it was a bit of a vanity project.
oh, totally. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we didn't think it was going to go anywhere.
We weren't even going to put it out originally.
We were gonna put
We
it out.
kind
We
of just done it for fun ourselves, just chatting between the two of us.
Wow.
Totally for fun, and then did put it out. People liked it. People listened to it, and so we made more. And
somehow 3 years later,
somehow
it was kind of
we're here.
got some legs. I guess from the writing process side of things, it's it kind of works. I guess it's a kind of a double-edged sword with us being married and living together, because it means we can get a hell of a lot of writing done, and we can, you know, discuss. I mean, we'll usually start with like a melody on like the guitar, so I'll like come up with a melody on the guitar that's kind of got some of those sort of Celtic-y, Scottish-y feels.
Yeah.
But it's just on like Sophie's old battered acoustic that she's had for like nearly 20 odd years. And like, we'll just sort of rattle that around the sort of breakfast table with the kids and things like that. And then, they'll tell me to put the guitar away eventually. And, but we can play over a riff over the course of like, even like a day. We can have an idea in our heads in the morning and then sort of progress it through over the course of the day, which in contrast to like a more normal band setup, like you say, and I've played in a few bands previously, it's got to be that much more collaborative in the room together, right? Who's bringing what ideas to the table. And obviously these days you can like send emails and stuff like that and file transfer ideas to each other, but it's still got to be that collaborative sort of process. And it's quite, iterative. Whereas here, because we've got the same ideas, what we want the songs to broadly sound like, we can actually move really, really quickly from initial idea to a half recorded riff. And even better is because we're married, we're very good at being quite blunt with each other. And so there's no like ego or politics or anything like that. You'll just happily tell me, no, that's shit.
Of course.
And I can be fine with it because like I know it's honest feedback. You don't have to worry about like upsetting your fellow band member and being like, oh mate, it's a great riff, but is it really? No, it's okay. Yeah, we can use it. Yeah, I'm sure we'll work out something. We can just be a lot more straight with it. So
I'm absolutely fascinated that you obviously bought your first album, Sam Hain, out. Was it 21? So pandemic time. So you bought that out. You obviously released it because you thought, well, why not? Maybe let people hear it. And then you ran with it, and then you've kind of like created this amazing new album. I mean, what's that process like? You've gone from like literally doing something that was just for a bit of fun to this now where you're getting like a lot of praise. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's mad.
Probably too big to think about. I think we just like to pretend that it's all very
Did you expect this? I mean, obviously you didn't expect to be going.
Definitely not.
Because obviously if you were going to.
That's happening.
Yeah.
We'll get into your history and I'm going to go into that in a little bit. But you obviously didn't think, well, we're married, let's start about, let's get big, let's start doing stuff. That probably the conversation, thanks to the pandemic, it's born you guys as a band. Thank you. It might not have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic.
I mean, it definitely wouldn't is the thing, right? I mean, and that's the crazy thing about a lot of it is that when we've got little kids, so we have like no free time as it is anyway. If we do have free time, one of us is going out while the other one's staying in. And, there's very little time that we find that we've actually got energy and, space. And then I guess the motivation to do something like a music project, which obviously takes a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of like constant work. And if it had, exactly as you say, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, then we probably wouldn't have had that slot of time. So we would have just carried on. I mean, I'd not played in a band for like 15 odd years, just due to life. You'd never have. So it was like something entirely weird and new and different for us as well.
For sure. I think it's really interesting that we spoke to another interviewer and he said he'd started his podcast and his everything in lockdown. I think it was really a unique time when people just were able to be a bit creative. So
I just drank more.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we did a lot of that. I mean, it took us like a year of lockdown before we finally got the guitars out. I think it's only because we've like finished the whiskey cabinet.
So when you guys do write, obviously you both got completely different yin yang vocal styles, which is so complementary. So it's amazing, right? It's so atmospheric. So when you do that, do you know who's going to do what at certain points? I always ask this when it's got multi vocalists in bands. Do you know what lines you're going to be doing? Is that written pre, or do you do that when you come to press record?
I think it's usually a case of we'll get the music done first because we really want to keep that sort of Celtic folky vibe going through. As much as like the sound is really rooted in death metal, melodic death metal, the key differentiator, I guess, that's guiding a lot of the keys and a lot of the scales that we're kind of working in is registered in sort of Scottish folk music. So a lot of what we're doing is taking the sort of melodies you might get from like a fiddle or an accordion or even like bagpipes or whatever, and then transposing that onto a guitar and then building the track out from there. I think we've tried it a few times where we start off with just like a beefy riff or something like that from a more traditional, like, death metal, mellow death metal sort of song. And it doesn't work because we only get as far as like coming up with a pretty decent sort of riff, which is fine, but it's no different than any other mellow death riff you've ever heard of because like it's, there's just so much good stuff out there and has been so much good stuff out there. But it means it's really hard to overlay that sort of Celtic melody over the top sort of retrospectively. So we have to kind of start with that. But once we get that done, that's when we'll kind of work on the idea of like the sort of passing the vocals between and see what bits would work with the lighter sections. I mean, a lot of the time, when you're doing your vocals, we'll sort of shift up the neck on the guitars to like some sort of higher strumming just to kind of add a bit more contrast and more dynamics to the overall sound. And if I'm doing more of my sort of gruff vocals, then that'll be like right down on the 7th string or your 5th string, just to get that real sort of depth to it and just max out. Again, the contrast is really what we're pushing for, and I think that's where the sort of strength in the sound sort of lies. I think it always sounds heavier if you've got that contrast between a sort of lighter tone like Soph's vocals and then something else, rather than if you just go super heavy all the time. But
are you always creative? Do you annoy each other with your creativity, or do you have this kind of like carte blanche attitude of like, you can wake me up at 4 a.m. and hum me a melody? How does it work?
I think I would be divorced immediately if I woke up at 4 a.m. with a melody. I think it's bad enough the breakfast table. If it was the middle of the night,
honestly,
that'd be couch. Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's just a really elaborate burn. It's like some of the lyrics are about his evil hag god. But I just think maybe it's just like elaborate.
It's a really long,
like we've had a
long insult. For 3 years, just calling my wife a hag god.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask you this as well, because I think I'm right in what I'm saying. You did everything yourself. There was no outside sources on this. All instruments with you guys, was it?
All the instruments were with us. So we do all the vocals on the guitar. We've got like a little bit of recording gear at home. So I did a bit of sound engineering when I was at college as a kid. I've just kind of kept a rough hand in just for the recording side of things. Like my mixing and mastering is not where it would need to be for the quality that we're looking for.
Yeah.
But the advantages with the gear you can get these days, I mean, I've got like a £200 audio interface unit into a £100 digital workstation on the laptop, and then a couple of DI boxes that just take our vocals and our guitars going into it, and then we've got an electronic kit that we just use to get the effectively the digital sounds, and then what we do is we transport all of that over to our engineer, so you can just send that via file transfer, and he then reskins everything, he reamps everything, all the mixing and everything like that. But it's great because it saves us a ton of time and b a ton of money being able to do it ourselves, because you can actually go as far as recording a song and putting some rough sort of effects on it, a little bit reverb on the vocals, a little bit of tones on the guitars, etc., and see if it's working. And you've not actually invested anything more than a bit of time. And if it's not, you can even scrap it at that stage. Obviously, we try not to have scrapped it at that stage, but it's not like back in the day, or if you're just doing studio recording and you've already paid up front for that weekend of studio time, and you have to record what you need to record there, or or you've just lost all that money. So it's a very different way of being able to do it. And again, the quality of the gear you can get for very affordable prices these days is massive.
And do you select? I'm full of questions, right? Oh, he's off. They're not even on the list. It's like, do you select like certain times of the day to do it? You're like, tonight when you're back home, we're going to go 8 till 10. Or is you just like, right, we're going to go and do it now? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, well,
we're practicing at the moment for playing live, which is very, very new and feels really big. So we set aside a bit of time for practicing together, because you're mostly practicing with the rest of the band, and because we can't do it at the same time, we've got kids. So we kind of practice a couple of nights a week. But then when we're making the album, it's like on the run up to kind of recording everything, it's quite full on.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, because it's usually like, I mean, this is getting into the real boring sort of schedule, right? But it's like home from work, get the dinner on, get the kids in the bath, kids in bed, right? Get the instruments out, right? Okay, bring the microphones like downstairs, close the door, put some padding over it to not wake the kids up, and then go nuts for it. But it's pretty intense when we're in the guts of the writing and recording. It can be pretty full on. And then after that, it's like
fun.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's very sort of boom bust in terms of like unique intensity. It's wild.
Most people sit with their wives and watch box sets, guys. You know,
we do a lot of that. Don't worry.
When you find the time.
Exactly.
I feel like this is like an anti, trying to rage against the death by box.
Yeah, I think especially we probably like have got halfway to complete Netflix.
Yeah.
And it's like so need to do something else for the sake of our own mental health.
Yeah,
of course. Now my next question goes on to how your patriotism towards your amazing country. Your themes that run through your music are pretty obvious. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you're singing about and what you're talking about? Are you talking about folklore? Is it just the nature, the atmosphere of your incredible place? And how important is it to you to be singing, from the heart for that?
I guess, I mean, firstly, thank you. I think it's mostly on the folklore and the sort of landscapes and areas and things like that. I think with our debut Samhain, it was kind of a lot looser as a set of concepts. With Corryvreckan, we made it a lot tighter. So the band name Hand of Kalliach is off the legend of the Kalliach, which is a sort of pre-Christian pagan sort of witch god of winter, who was responsible for sort of rising from the Corryvreckan, which is this enormous whirlpool off the west coast of Scotland, where I've got a lot of family from. Apparently it's the third biggest whirlpool in the world, but again, you just don't know a lot of these things. But this was the joy of doing a lot of the band stuff as well when we were first kicking off.
Do you research that? Do you look for little nuggets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's been half the.
Start, you can't stop.
That's it. Yeah, you go down a proper little rabbit hole. Yeah. It was stuff that we just did not know. I think that's the thing. Like, you see so much in pop culture these days, with reference to like a lot of Norse mythology, for example, which is just, very popular at the moment. But there's equally that amount, if not more, on the Scottish and Celtic sides of things, for sure. And every time we've dropped in to do a bit of album research, like Soph says, we just go like right deep dive into like rabbit holes of weird monsters and weird legends and just a whole bunch of like mythology that is just not known even to Scottish people born and bred in Scotland. So it's a total blast, because we've just got like on our laptop, we've just got this bookmark folder with like 50 links of all the interesting snippets and a folder of all the like little cropped illustrations and pictures we've pulled from like folklore bits and pieces. And every time we've done a new bit of writing, we always try and bring in a good level of the sort of myths and
that's
legends.
Funny that, because when I spoke to Sabaton many years ago, Per, one of the main writers, he has a folder because they sing about world wars and stuff like that.
Mega history.
He's just got folder and folder and folder on his laptop of all different stories that he wants to write about and sing about. And that leads me to the next thing. Would you ever consider, because it's such a broad spectrum and you can go so heavy onto the myths and folklore of your amazing country, would you ever do a concept album?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of. I mean, I guess Corryvreckan in a way is kind of a concept album because it's so focused around a lot of the folklore and the mythology related to the Kalliach and the rise from the whirlpool. And there's a lot of various representations of the Corryvreckan as well throughout other sorts of folklore. So it even crosses over into Irish folklore, where it was the first time it was ever described was as this yawning, vomiting gullet of the sea. Before it even had the name, and that's why we got the sort of track name for the first track, which is Three Seas, which is in the first ever recorded reference to Corryvreckan, which I can never remember the year. I think it was like 200 AD or something like that. Wow. They basically note, and this was before it was called Corryvreckan, but they just note that it's this yawning, vomiting gullet that sits in the middle of this three seas combining together and creating this sort of gigantic maelstrom at the start of winter. Because it's very tidal, the Corryvreckan. We actually went up there in summer last year just to go and see it while it was calm. But it was still a really, it was amazing to go and see it, wasn't it? So I think a lot of the stuff in Corryvreckan is really thematically tied to that. You've got the Cauldron, which is track 8, which was another name for the Corryvreckan, and that's got a lot of connotations in Irish folklore with rebirth and sort of bringing people back from the dead, and lots of nice dark sort of spooky stuff.
Fascinating. I love all that.
Yeah. There's just nuts amounts of stuff, isn't it? You can tell I'm kind of starting to get on my hobby horse as well.
No, I love it.
I'll go for hours if
absolutely
if I don't get rained
in. Time. I often ask bands like, especially from Norway, atmospheric black metal bands that I speak to, etc., etc., etc. Your music has a lot of atmosphere in there, some haunting melodies, amazing. I can picture myself up there in the Highlands, something like that. In an ideal world, how would you like the listener to listen to your albums? Is there any specific place or situation that you'd like them to get immersed in? Would you like them to go for a walk through? If you could take the ideal fan and listen to your music and say, right, go and walk through this wood or past this lake or through this highlands or sit in this pub, where would you like? What's the ideal situation?
That's such a cool question.
That's a great question.
When you're having a really bad day, when you just sit in the corner have a little cry. No, I'm kidding.
I guess a lot of the seascapes on the West Coast, like we still go over to Isla, which is where I've got a lot of family from, and in fact the audio, I don't think we've actually told anyone this, so here you go, Dan. The audio that you've got, exactly, the audio that is at the start of the album on 3Cs, and also the sort of lull just at the end of the last track of Twilight on the Pyre, are both recordings just on my phone of one of my favorite beaches over on the West Coast. And it's just got these colossal waves, but there's these huge sort of stretches of silence between the waves, and the waves get up to like sort of 10, 15 feet, and they are absolutely massive. And then there's just nothing for like the next sort of 30 seconds. It's this really bizarre and sort of quite eerie, but really very impressive spot to actually see. And without sounding too up myself, I really felt like it was a really great representation of what we were trying to do with the music, to have a lot of these really crushingly heavy sort of moments with these sort of much calmer, stiller sort of ethereal bits in between. And then it was a phone recording, right? So then I just had to chuck it over to my poor sound engineer, Winter, and be like, Winter, make it sound good.
Talking about phone recordings, are you ever going to get the kids involved? Are you going to get them like doing? How many kids you got? 1 or 2?
3.
Yeah.
3. Wow, 3. Are you going to get some like sound?
Hair, Dan. I used to have hair,
yeah. I've got 3 myself. I've still got some.
Oh, nice.
But I mean, do you ever want to get them involved? They could do some BVs on anything, Maybe in the future.
Definitely the long game. I mean, the oldest one's like 7. They're super keen.
It's time now. We've got that ideal voice.
Absolutely.
Because we're starting practicing playing, and we've got a drummer now and a guitarist. And our son was so pissed off that we got a drummer. He was like, but I'm the drummer.
You said I could be the drummer.
You said I could be the drummer.
Yeah, you got a good drummer then, lad. Come on. There's your pots and pans. Come on, get going. Get a rhythm going. Can you blast beat?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Now, sticking the probably last question of this album, right, before we go on to other stuff. The awesome track Fell Rains has a great video. Now, did you suffer for your art in that water, John?
I definitely did.
In a kilt, no less.
I know. I've watched it a few times now. What was going on? How cold was it? What time of year was it? I'm more interested in.
Well, this was the worst thing, right? Because it was perfect. Like the setting was perfect for what we were trying to do. Because it was bang in November, so like just after Samhain, which is the precursor to Halloween. That was always the Kalliach sort of events, and that was why we called the first album Samhain. So it was like exactly the right time of year for the general vibe that we go for within the album. And like even you always find, even on the drive out there, like even just the hills and the lochs we were going past,
ridiculously stunning.
Yeah. I
mean, it was over on the West Coast, so we're on the East Coast, obviously in Edinburgh, but it was a couple of hours drive on the way over, and it was just jaw-droppingly beautiful.
Yeah, rolling atmospheric fog, kind of purple heather, lots everywhere.
A lot of orange in the trees, and it was just like, wow,
it's ridiculous.
It's absolutely stunning. And it was totally by chance that it happened to be as perfect weather as it was, because we'd locked the day in because that was the only day the videographers were around, because they're from down south, so they just happened to be up doing another band's video, actually a completely different genre, in a similar sort of location. And it could have been sunny, it could have been like thrashing with rain, it could have been anything in between, but it just ended up being absolutely perfect. But thankfully for the loch scene, they agreed to do that bit last, so we got to do all the other sort of bits before that.
Did you take dressing gowns with you and stuff like that? Because you knew what
I literally took my dressing gown down. Yeah, I'm that much of a big Jessie. I was like standing down there. I think the problem was though, like they promised it would just be like one shot, and you were standing at the side watching.
Dunk him again.
Well, apart from Terry, dunk him again. Yeah. But James, one of the directors, was sitting there with like the camera right up close to the sort of water, and he was like, "Right, just need to go head down." And you said he was like getting really frustrated because there was all these bubbles still coming up, and he was
like, "John, just do it again, but just without the bubbles."
Without the bubbles.
I need to breathe. I can't die for this.
Yeah, I've been down there 5 minutes, and every time I go back down, it's not even like air was coming out of my mouth. It was just like out of the bubbles in my beard and things like that. And it was like, you need to stop emitting bubbles. What's going on? The first time I came up, I'd said like, all right, so do you want me to like come up like back first out of the water? He's like, no, it'd be much better if you like lean forwards. And so, great, this could be like right up the nose.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we did that. It was 5 degrees outside of the water. I
Wow.
don't know how cold it was inside the water, but it was breathtakingly cold. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
But then the first time I went up, there was just this silence across like the set, and I think there was like 5 people just in awkward silence as James was just sitting there looking at his camera. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I didn't record for some reason, John. Well,
did on purpose.
We're going to do it again. So they ended up doing like
he wanted you to.
times,
He was bringing your anger out, John. He wanted you to be angry.
That's it. I mean, that was what you were saying. You're like, well, it was great. Yeah, you didn't actually have to act at all. It was just entirely natural. Like,
it works, man.
Throw me in the water.
That's format with the lockets.
Totally worked. Now, how did you both get together? Let's talk a bit of history about you guys. You know, I mean, obviously, how did you get musically? Were you together? Did you find each other through music, or were you together and discovered you like the same things? How did that all happen? And then to get to this now,
I mean, I guess it's some kind of way.
Does it count if it's like
in a rock club? Yeah.
Sweaty, horrible rock club.
You met in a rock club. That's good.
Yeah,
pretty much. Well, we actually, believe it or not, like we went to the same school when we were younger, but like didn't really know each other too much. Well, we kind of joined the school as I'd left the
same
school,
year.
So
Same year.
Same year. Yeah. Pretty wild.
Small world.
Yeah, but it was when it was when I'd gone off to college to go and do a year of sound engineering there. You'd come in to do art or whatever it was. Yeah, there we go. Remember. There we go. But then we didn't really bump into each other again for the next sort of few years, and then bumped into each other in like we're up in Aberdeen, up in the northeast, and we were both pretty boozed in one of their sort of grimiest, best rock clubs. Like, oh, Sophie.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Wasn't the garage, was it? Was it the garage?
No, it was Exodus, if you've ever been up there.
I think I know.
Kirk's, top of
I played the garage many years ago.
Nice,
Aberdeen,
nice.
Many years ago.
Awesome.
It's good, sticky floor.
Yeah, I love all those. Can't beat it.
Yeah. Nothing comes with ice.
Obviously, you're both from a musical background, so that must have been like, okay, we like the same things. We're doing, we play instruments. We can complement each other. So what bands got you to go to those rock clubs in the first place, John and Sophie? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we were
as
all
kids,
sorts, really. Yeah, I think that's it. And everyone's always embarrassed by what you were listening to, at those sort of ages before you've had the chance to really
go on then.
Find the niche,
embarrassed. Right? What's embarrassing?
Well, no, I mean, I guess I'm
not.
I'm still into Deftones. Yeah, like, Deftones is fantastic. I love Deftones.
Okay,
I will die on that hill for sure.
And still am. We really into Bjork and Bjorky type vocals, which I think is the reason I like to sing.
And I guess like at the same time, it was just the time where there was the massive wave of new metal going through as well. So I think even then we were listening to all sorts of weird bits and pieces, some slightly more sort of esoteric stuff, but even like just very mainstream bits and pieces like even like Slipknot and stuff like that back in the day. But I mean, I think there was still a lot of cool stuff that came out of the new metal wave, as much as it gets like a lot of flack these days, I think. And there's a big resurgence, I think, as well for it as well. I think and in some ways, I guess some of the music that we're kind of making now does take a bit of influence from that, in that you can make quite extreme metal that can still be catchy without being too plasticky at the sort of very far end of the new metal sort of spectrum. I mean, like you said, Deftones, I think, are still doing some amazingly unique sort of art, really, that is just continued to evolve from a sort of foundation that was originally in the sort of new metal sphere. And then I guess as we kind of progressed, like you quite like a bit of Trivium as well, and that was one I was always really big into. And but I mean, our playlists in the house are really pretty wild. Like, they are pretty diverse. It's either, well, yours are a bit more like normal, I guess, like more on the sort of Bjorky sort of like, I mean, a bit more normal than extreme dodgy, lo-fi Norwegian black metal, which I might be sort of playing.
Do you like Mirka, please, like that kind of thing?
Yeah. You've been kind of into that as well, I think. Yeah, you quite like her vocals, especially on some of her sort of more down tempo sort of stuff. But then on my side of things, like it goes right from the extreme to like well, you always take the piss, like I'm just listening to elevator music because I just go to like extreme ambient, so like really sort of mega decompression. It means I'm really shit with like a party playlist because like nobody wants to listen to anything I've got.
So how do you guys like to relax away from the music? At what point do you just go, right, that's it? You know, how do you switch off, or is it not even possible to switch that musical creativity off?
I think we definitely try and compartmentalize the writing stuff into like a month or two when it's really, really intense, because once we've done the writing and recording, there's such a long tail of then doing all the audio editing and getting that sort of shipped off to the mixer, and then doing all the back and forth there, and then doing all the sort of workup and the admin side of things there. So there's usually like a bubble of it going on in the background. But I think other than the really intense writing process, we generally don't do a huge amount on this sort of a high intensity time, in sort of spare time. So, back to just mogging out and pounding the wine and whiskey cabinets, really, as much as possible.
It's
so
normal.
Yeah.
But I guess we can't escape it if we're kind of out on a walk and, something comes out, we'll definitely kind of chat about it. But apart from that, it's quite, it's quite separate.
It's not too bad. It does get pretty funny sometimes. So I've got like a bunch of recordings. I think every guitarist anywhere has got this, where they've got like a bunch of recordings in the front of them just going, and then and then you're listening to it back later, like what?
And then
what? And if one day, somebody like finds my lost phone and just sort of plays what's on it,
there might be a great album in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Super experimental sort of stuff. Yeah.
Now, tell me about these shows, because obviously, I can only assume you've not done any shows yet, right? So you're obviously building a band around you. So tell me about the band. Where are those guys from? Are they from the past? Are they new? And what's planned to back this incredible album up?
Thanks very much. They're both new guys. Tom, the drummer, we got in touch with him back sort of late last year, about October time. He's really keen. He's got like a really broad background in drumming, also including Latin jazz as well, actually, interesting enough. But he just loves anything that's got a bit of flair and energy to it. And he's been absolutely fantastic, bringing a lot of passion. And I think some of the most fun we've been having recently is just practicing live, because it has been just so long since we've actually played. Well, you've obviously just never played on the live side of things, but until we've sort of started spinning up on the practices, and just I think the fun that you get even just from being in the practice room.
That live energy, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's just something I'd really not realized how much I'd been missing, and so I'm really getting a kick out of that.
I love watching live music.
Well, exactly. Yeah, you can still get the vibe. Yeah, exactly. And then Dehan, the guitarist, we actually used a website, sort of Facebook or like dating site for musicians kind of thing, just called like Band Mix, and we just put a random sort of selection of like found guitarists, and just like, would you like to come and play with us? Can you shred? Can you do all the tricky bits so I can just hang out and play rhythm?
Amazing.
And he's brilliant. Yeah.
So you're playing,
he's a younger guy.
So you're playing guitar. So are you playing bass, or are you?
I play bass.
You're playing bass.
John plays guitar and sings.
And then we've got
So you're a gig virgin, like live.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the band, we've got you've been rehearsing, you've got amazing tracks. When's the shows?
Hopefully this sort of summer. I think one of the big challenges. Yeah. Babysitters for sure. Or just bring to the shows.
Just figuring it out, really.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we want to make sure that it sounds good, obviously. And I think one of the challenges that we've got is, having done the studio side of things first, like there's probably going to be that much more of a level of expectation of quality, not just from listeners but from ourselves as well. Like we don't want to go up there and then sound like a mega just getting started band that hasn't played live in 50 years or whatever.
How are you creating the Celtic sounds? Are you using dare I say backing, or are you?
No, it's totally fair. We basically definitely, because we had a long discussion about there, a whole bunch of long discussions about like what the best way would be to do it, between making sure you're actually doing a live sound but also making sure you're getting the full effect of the songs, because like you're pointing to. There's so much on the atmospheric side of things that we'd want to make sure is still in there. Otherwise, it's going to sound like something's missing, both for us and for any listeners that have heard of stuff before. So we basically got some stems back from the mixing engineer with like the atmospheric track, so like bits of strings, bits of choruses, and things like that, and basically tried to be relatively restricted in terms of the amount that we're actually pumping to the desk, but we've been working out a way we can actually do that in the practice rooms. It's just taken a bit of time to really build those tracks and teach Tom how to play with like one ear's got like a metronome in for him, so that he knows when the atmospherics are coming in, and then the other bit's going off to the speaker. So it's a lot more technical than anything I'd ever done from a live situation before, because I'd only played in a band. I mean, I used to drum when I was playing live.
I'm a drummer, so I can't play. I struggle with clicks in studios, never mind on stage.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I would find what Tom's having to do for us like super off-putting, because he's got clicks in one ear and then he's got the audio track in the other ear just to get the sort of flavor, and then he can't hear anything of what's actually going on in the practice room. Sometimes if we've like missed the track or whatever, or we've cocked up, go like, "Oh, Tom, whoa. Stop, man, stop."
Do you think Jonathan Davis isn't available for you guys?
We'll see.
Who would you like to tour with ideally? You know, what band would you say, oh God, that would be great to get on a show with them or whatever? So obviously touring as such is obviously going to be a tough thing for you guys with 3 kids, obviously, as in like an extensive tour. So you could be like weekend warriors gigs here and there, but who would you like to play with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's another one we've kind of struggled with. In fact, we've always struggled with trying to find, the for fans off references that all the sort of writers and PR are looking for in terms of, well, who do you want to sort of list down there? And that sounds really pretentious, like we're saying, like we've got a super unique sound. But I guess the challenge is that we've always kind of straddled the folk and melodeath stuff. But in some ways that doesn't really work so well to our advantage, because I think sometimes we're too heavy for the folk crowd and maybe a little bit too soft for the dead set, melodeath, more death metal sort of crowd. So you're in this sort of weird, well, what we thought was a valley, but it seems like there's actually some folk there, so that's great. But I think there's some cracking, like maybe something like some of the Atlas Black sort of acts, like there was the guys, or Token actually were one of the really great bands that have come on Prosthetic recently, and they're doing a lot of the sort of folklore infused sort of melodeath side of things. I think that was some of the fun with getting to sign to Prosthetic.
I think the good thing about what you're doing as well, you could play with so many genres: black metal, death metal, folk, ambient. You could do so much. You could just go across the board, which helps a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to flip it on its head and be like, rather than worried about making sure you're spot on with the genre with the band you're supporting, like, feel free to kind of slot into
to mix,
and be on the fringe of one of those genres instead. That would be totally viable. So I mean, we'd be absolutely game once we get up to speed, I guess. But there's a lot of road we've got to get through to make sure we're up to quality.
Of course. What's the Scottish scene like? These days. Do you get out amongst it? Do you see other bands? What's the club? I'm trying to think. The last time I was in Edinburgh, I played a gig in Edinburgh. I'm trying to think of the venue. What's a rock club in Edinburgh?
Bannerman's, maybe.
Bannerman's. That's it. Bannerman. I was going to say. I thought it was Bannerman's. Yeah. Do you get out amongst it much? Do you see what's going on? Do you any good Scottish bands coming through?
Yeah, we were down there just a couple of months ago, because we so rarely get out a lot of the time.
It's March tomorrow, guys. It's March.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh man.
Where's the year going?
Exactly.
January.
It's Easter in 29 days.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. But yeah, we do get out like as much as we can, I guess. Glasgow is just the best scene by far for particularly more extreme metal in Scotland. But you still do get some really cool gigs coming through there. It was November, not last year, but the year before. 22, I went and saw the Faces of Death tour, which was like the likes of Rivers of Nihil, Fallujah, which is probably my favorite band, and where we get a lot of the inspiration for some of the atmospherics from as well, because they do like a really cool job there on the tech death side of things, obviously. Allegiant was there, and then we saw Dropkick Murphys, went up to Dunfermline to go see them. That was an absolute blast. So I mean, there is like some good bands come through that is like that will absolutely make some time to go and see. And I think as long as you're open to different genres that aren't exactly in your niche preferred wheelhouse, then there's loads of really good gigs to be going to.
Well, I'm guessing that Sophie, you like a more probably a wider range of music, being like probably more melodic, more dare I say pop or like whatever you want to say. What would you be? What kind of music would you want to go and see? What have you seen recently? Or
I think, well, I guess I like and what I'm influenced by would be maybe a bit different, but I do love a weird kind of high female vocalist.
Yeah.
So I love Florence and the Machine and her vocals.
Yeah.
You know, something really folky and
was it last year you saw Bjork?
Yeah, Bjork.
Amazing.
Yeah, Florence.
And then you were through for a Bombay Bicycle Club the other day as well.
Yeah, Bombay.
Which is a guy, but he's got that sort of weird sort of, sort of floaty or sort of vocals sometimes as well, which I guess is, it doesn't have to be an influence, I guess, but it's like.
Okay, this leads me perfectly into this question: Who would be on your musical Mount Rushmore? 4 artists etched in stone. John, whoever goes first, you decide amongst yourself. Has it got to be a band? It could be 4 vocalists, whatever. Who'd be on each of your Mount Rushmores?
I'd have Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, one. Definitely have Joni Mitchell.
This is yours. This is yours, Sophie. You can have whoever you want.
We get separate ones.
Yeah, you get separate ones. Yeah, not 2 each. You got 4.
I'm gonna go for all like really high.
Good. Go on, Joni Mitchell.
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, Joni Mitchell, Bjork, probably Florence. I'm gonna think about the last one.
Okay, come back to you.
Oh man. Okay, so I'd probably go for Joey Jordison on the drums because he was.
No, it hasn't got to be a band, John. It hasn't got to be a band. It can be anything.
Anyone. Okay. Well, I'll still take Joey. I'll take like
your musical your musical influences. Yeah, your influences. But great drummer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably say Scott, the main guitarist from Fallujah as well. I think some of the stuff he's done is just absolutely phenomenal. As well on the vocal sides of things. Maybe Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, stuff like that would be fantastic, and maybe, oh man, so many to choose from. I'm going to be kicking myself when I
know.
Back to this.
Two things that I was at that Metallica gig at Donington when Lars Ulrich was ill, and they had Dave Lombardo, they had Joey Jordison playing. Like it was just like seeing how Metallica's drums should have been played. It was pretty cool to be there, but it felt like a bit bad. You know what I mean? I love Lars. These guys. Go on then, Sophie. You got one more.
What's yours? What's your one?
Come on, don't throw it back to me. No, it's not. The spotlight's on you.
There is this amazing female vocalist. I can't remember her name. It's like Areta. Was it Areta? I can't remember her name, but she's amazing.
Okay, we'll just stick a face.
Say with confidence, and then we'll Google it afterwards.
Self-esteem.
Yeah.
Self-esteem. There we go.
Let me know, and I'll say at the end of the show. I'll say, by the way, Sophie wants to say that the 4th person was going to be.
I'll go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Nice. So. Let's. What's on the bucket list for you guys? What do you want to achieve? You've come so far in so little time, out of the blue, like a rabbit out of a hat. What do you want to do with this? Is it as far as are you just taking each day at a time, or have you got now you've got some traction? Have you got aspirations?
Yeah, I think live shows is definitely the thing we've been working up to for a while. It's something that a lot of our kind supporters have been really requesting that we look at doing, and it's something we are keen to do. It's just been challenging to get up to standard, but having got the band recruited, which was one of the hardest bits to do, and actually the kids are now starting to get to an age where we can get a childminder in to look after them without worrying that they're going to burn the house down or murder. So that's always a plus. And then I think we'll also just see how it goes with prosthetic, and hopefully if things are going well, and they certainly seem to be going really well on the sales side of things and the stream side of things, then our contract with them is if it goes well and we're both happy, then we've got another couple of albums potentially in the tank down the line, which is great. So I mean, and having them backing us has been a huge motivator as well to make sure we're getting up to standard as well, and doing in line with our peers now as well, which as I say, we're both massive fans of anyway. In fact, I think I bought like 7 prosthetic releases over the past sort of year. Yeah, before we even got the signing in, and then we're like, oh.
Just off the record, how did the signing happen? How did you link up?
Yeah, that was a really cool one. So I think when we were on an underground label in the UK called Trepanation Recordings, which is run by Dan Dolby of band Mastiff. They're like sort of black and sort of I guess they're kind of a bit grind, a bit hardcore. But yeah, they're doing really well these days as well. But Dan runs that label, or he's unfortunately winding up at the moment just because he's got so many things on. But he'd been really encouraging of us when Salmon had come out, and he'd been like, super, you guys should really push it. And actually, when we'd finished and got the masters back for Corryvreckan, I think you pinned him on to Dan, and he'd been like, guys, this is great. You should pitch this higher, which is an incredibly kind thing for him to say.
Nice guy.
I know. So we did. So we made like a really small list of like, I think it was 3 labels that we thought, in our dreams we would like to pitch and say, well, that would be a really great home for us based on the roster and what they're kind of into. And Prosthetic was genuinely was top of the list of the first ones we emailed. And like Steve got back in like 2 hours. So Steve Joe is like one of their, I think he is the A&R guy, or at least one of the A&R guys over at Prosthetic. And it turned out when he got back to you in like 2 hours, it was like, it turned out he'd actually picked up when we did our first ever EP, which was a real self-produced like 5-track job. That was a very experimental bit that we did in lockdown. Which we don't necessarily like at all now, but like we leave it there because some people like to see the progression and the story. So as much as we're proud and not wanting to get it, leave it up there, we do. But anyway, Steve had actually picked us up. He'd picked up one of the only 50 CDs that were ever made by Trepanation off that EP, and bought it, and it'd been mailed over to him in the States, and he'd been following us ever since then, just quietly, and unbeknownst to us, like one of our Bandcamp followers had been this A&R guy from Prosthetic. So when we emailed him, he just came back and was like, I love your sound, I've always been following you guys.
Amazing.
Let me pass it was nuts, wasn't it?
Very cool. That seems very easy. I mean, you made it sound easy, you know what I mean? And it's like
and we don't want to like, I guess we're not meaning to make it sound or try to undermine the difficulties that obviously people,
if you're doing something right that people want to listen to, then you're doing it right from the off, so it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I think that was just a wild thing, because I think you're
pretty lucky.
That's
the other thing. John,
we are pretty lucky.
John's famously extremely jammy, like even with the band, like the drummer just so happens to hand make guitars.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
Sculpted from lots of different woods, these gorgeous creations that just, so happens to be. And guitarist happens to also
be an amazing drummer. That's kind of worked out. And live like 5 minutes away, which is just
and live and
amazing.
Just music PR. So like, I don't know, it's just
all happens for a reason, as they say. Now we're coming to the end. We're coming to the end. So a couple more. So describe the band in, I'm going to say 3 words. So describe the band in 3 words.
In terms of genre,
how would you describe the band? If you had 3 words to describe the band to somebody who didn't know anything about you, what would you say?
Scottish.
Good. Okay.
Good one.
Scottish.
Scottish. There we go. I guess heavy and ethereal would kind of be the 2 words. I don't know. Like,
I agree with that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, what one track should I play from your repertoire next, and why?
Ooh. Well, we've got different favorites, so
okay. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to bookend this interview with one and the other. So you choose to give me 2, one each, and it's going to be played.
All right. Well, yours is Kieran Cronin. By far. And I don't know if you can stomach a 7-minute, but my favorite is the last track, which is Off Twilight.
Which one was that one?
The last one, which is Off Twilight in the Pyre. That's the big closing self-indulgent one. So
it's good. It's
nice. Awesome. Lastly, my very last question, very important one. What's the most used emoji in your phone?
the poo emoji.
Yeah, boring parental sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yeah.
You must get some much more interesting answers than that.
No, well, it's like aubergine or,
yeah,
or
exactly. Like, nope,
or that kind of
in
thing.
this house. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or something like the lightning strike. John, Sophie, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Very appreciate you joining me, and good luck with everything. I'm fascinated by your journey, and I can't wait to hear more.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, all the best.
Thank you.